Hi there. In this tutorial, I would like to talk about the sequencer. You know that Elements Cinematic Rhythms has three ways to use this library. So you can use Elements Cinematic Rhythms three different ways: the audio loops, the round robins, and the sequencer. You know that the round robins are the yellow keys. Remember that you have the info tab here to have just a recap. For each key we have up to 12 different round robin, so 12 different hit for each note. Okay, mapped on up to 6 different dynamic level. I love this mapping philosophy where I have the dynamic level spread on different keys. I prefer this way because allow me to play better the rolling and I can play fast. I can choose exactly which dynamic I want, so it's a little bit, in my opinion, a better way. And then remember that if you want the classic mapping way where you have the dynamic level, mapped on the one key and controlled by the MIDI velocity, you have the, when you see this orange color, so you can also use the round robin playing this way. Okay, so you have both. You have the classic mapping, dynamic mapping, and the mapping on the different level, dynamic levels on different keys. Well, this is the simplest way, the simplest use of the library. Round robin, you create your performance, you record your part. Then there are the audio loops, the red keys. I think that having the audio loops mapped on the same keyboard it's really cool because allow me to play in a very inspiring way the library, because I have a real performance and then I can play with the round robin over the audio loop. Of course, remember that you have separate microphones, so you can select the two mix for the loop, audio loops. You can see here, so close in the room, so you can create a different mix, for example, for audio loops and for round robin. So maybe I want the audio loop with more room, you know, and maybe the round robin with more close mic. Okay, well, so round robin, audio loop, all together, and then there is the sequencer. With the sequencer, you play the round robin round robins with the sequencer, so in an automatic way. And of course you can combine all these three ways. Indeed, remember that, for example, you have the if you navigate in the presets, you have the category number 3, multi-sequencer, where you can load a multi-instrument that where you have the audio loops and the yellow keys, so the round robins, controlled by the internal sequencer. And then remember an important thing: when you are using a multi-instruments like that and you are using the sequencer, I suggest you to go in play. This way the sequencer is perfect synchronized for all the instances and you have a perfect timing, right? Well, but now I would like to explain in the simplest way possible from the beginning how to use the sequencer. So let me start from a single instrument, so the simplest use of the library, and let me show you the sequencer. So I click on the sequencer tab, okay, and I click on enable. Now you can see the blinking here of these graphics, and the sequencer is playing the this first note. Of course, I can change the timing. Okay, now if I want to modulate the dynamic, I have two ways. Or I use the note where I have the dynamic levels mapped in a classical way. And so if I use this key, of course I have the mapping, the dynamic level controlled by the MIDI velocity. Okay, for example, I can create a rolling well. Another workflow is using the yellow range, so each dynamic level for each note and up to 12 round robin for each hit, so you don't have the classic machine gun effect, because there are up to 12 round robin for each hit. Of course, in this case, if I click only the, for example, this note, the C, the first round robin note, I don't have a dynamic, a changing on the dynamic level, because of course there is not the dynamic level on this note, right? So if I want to create a modulation in the dynamic level, I have to change the note. Okay, and I think it's really creative. You have a lot of control with this mapping because you can choose exactly which dynamic you want in that specific moment, in that specific beat, you know. And with the sequencer you have the performance, like if someone is playing for you and you tell him hey guys, hey guy, please now play more with more intensity. Okay, now soft. So you can create this like a director. You can create this workflow like if you are directing the musician. Then of course then we can choose also the number of the steps. For example, now I want the maximum value. Let me try. To the click. With the duration, of course, you can customize, you can change the duration of each step, which means a sound with less release. So duration 0 has this effect, which is not nice, of course. So if you want a shorter note, a little bit less, for example, resonance, okay, well, then, for example, let me set this time. Okay, now you can see here these key switches. Okay, white, blue, purple. Well, for with white and blue you activate the sequencer, so you can create an automation. For example, you can select, you can choose when you want the sequencer, because for example now I want the first part without sequencer, you know. For example, let me record. Well, and now, for example, in the second part, I want to play with the sequencer. So from this part, I record. Here I record the key switch, the white key switch, to have the sequencer off. After this part, I go with the sequencer. So I record the second key switch, so the blue color, which is this one. So from this bit I have the sequencer activated, right? Let me try. Off. And now I have the sequencer. Okay, let me record this part, but before I want to quantize a little bit better these notes. Okay, now let me record. Now, if I want to change the timing, now I can use the purple color here. So the first key switch here is of course the tempo which you have selected. So the first tempo, the first time selected here. And with the second purple color, you will select this one, and etc, etc. So let me try. So this way I can create a complex performance, you know? Well, these are my key switches. So I quantize them. I have to change maybe this part. Yeah. I want this note and this note. It's better this way. So, as you can see, you can use this library in a lot of different ways. And if I want to save this pattern, I click on save, and now let me explain very well this workflow. Remember that in Elements we have two different internal browser, the expert browser, so the expert presets where you load and where you save all these settings here, and then you have the presets for the sequencer. Well, when I click on save, this window will be open, and you can see percussion preset, sequencer presets, and sound design presets. Of course, I have to select sequencer preset now because I want to save the preset of this tab of the sequencer. So I have to click on sequencer presets. You can see all the all the factory presets for the sequencer. Now, for example, I can create a new folder. I can call it user, and inside the folder I can save my pattern 1, right? Save. Well, if I click on presets, I can't see the folder because I need to reset the engine. To do that, just play on this icon here. Well, now I can click on presets and I see the user folder, and there is also my preset that I can load. Okay, so this is the workaround, and this is nice because, for example, let me show you. I can duplicate this instrument, and I want to load another instrument. This is frame drum hands, one, but maybe I want to play also with 2 drums. Why not? Okay. Okay. And I would like to have the same sequencer also for these 2 drums. So I click on enable and I navigate with the browser. I select user, my pattern, and then I have the same pattern, and I can play, for example, together my frame drum at the same time. So 2 instances, click. Of course, there are a lot of presets. Each folder has a category, but just to have a list of instruments. But of course, you can also load, I don't know, now I've loaded 2 drums, but I can also load a warrior drum pattern. There is no problem. For example, I love this workflow. I love duplicate the instrument, and maybe I can load another instrument, for example, medieval tom 1. Yes, okay, replace, and I create a multi-instrument, so medieval tom 1, 2, and 3, and then maybe 4 on the same MIDI channel. Okay, so now I have this combination. I can adjust also a little bit the panning. Well, for example, in this case I have different instances, you know, and if I want to activate the sequencer for all these instances, of course I can use the key switch blue. Now I have the sequencer activated, but you can listen that the instances are not synced, because as if you remember well, I have to go and play. Now are synced. So now I'm using the same pattern for each of these. No, because yeah, each instrument has a different pattern here. But anyway, of course, I can play and just to create something different. Okay, of course I can play all together. So I'm playing this one. And the multi. And as I said, usually I love playing with the sequencer, maybe playing also with the time key switch. When you use the time key switches here, if you want to have a perfect timing, because you know maybe you have a little bit of latency, try to use the input quantize. There is also the key switch that are these two key switches here at the end. So one to activate the input quantize and one to deactivate, so you can activate at the same time for each instances. Okay, because with the input quantize, when you change the timing with the purple colors key switches, you have a perfect timing because it is quantized. So it's easy, it's more easy. Just to test, and remember that the input quantize works only in real time. When you have record your MIDI part, you can deactivate. Also, I suggest to deactivate it. So this is the sequencer, and I think it's pretty cool because you know you can create a really complex part. My suggestion is use this library in any ways possible. Audio loops, of course, to have an instant sound. And then you can play over the audio loops with the round robins, for example, manually, or play it by the sequencer, like in this case. you can combine all these ways, and you can use this library to create a really complex part, but in my opinion in a really easy way. Let me try, for example, loading also a Gran Cassa. Okay, I enable the sequencer. Let me try all together with the click. Okay. Using also Berlin Studio as usual, you know. So it's easy playing all play all these instruments together with the sequencer. And of course then I love add also the audio loop. So I think it's a really powerful combination. So audio loops, sequencer that plays the round robins. Even if remember that of course the audio loops are really cool and I love it because are real performance and in my opinion are always useful to have an instant sound, and when you are working it's really important in my opinion, and also to create a more organic sound create a layering with audio loops plus round robins. And but another important difference between the round robin even if you play the round robin manually without the sequencer, of course, is that the audio loop has the time stretching. It's really good, the time stretching of Kontakt. But for example, let me try to improve the tempo. Now it's really fast. Now I play the audio loops. And now I play the round robin with the sequencer. So the round robin is always perfect, as not a little bit of artifact if you change the time. But as usual, I love to combine all these ways. So I suggest you to test all these different ways, and remember that you have also the multi-sequencer category, so you have just a starting point, you have the multi-instruments. But I think it's cool when you start from a single instrument category and you create your sessions, your setup, you know, because you can load 3 medieval toms, then you can load a Gran Cassa, a drum kick, a frame drum, a medieval tom, or a black tom, a Latin tom. There are a lot of instruments, a combo hit, a plastic percussion, a metal percussion, the taikos. So it's cool when you start from the single instrument and you can create your setup, you can create your session, you know. And this is, in my opinion, also a right way to use this library. Of course, I created a lot of multi-instruments like starting point, so you can load a multi-instrument with sequencer or without sequencer, and you are ready. Okay, so I hope that this tutorial was helpful, and see you in the next video. Ciao ciao and bye bye.